from the board. Just say congratulations to those students. Their hard work. Thank you so much. All right, item B3, California School Employees Association report. They had a meeting tonight that was going to make it not possible for them to be here unless that finished early, but it looks like it's not. So we will pass on item B3. Item B4, report on California Math Standards Integrated Math. Superintendent Abel.
Thank you, President Swallen. This evening, you're going to hear an extensive report from Ginger Johnson and from Michael Coates. And Ginger, I'll turn it over for your introduction.
This board report on Modesto City Schools Integrated Math Pathway is being provided at the request of Trustee Walker. The integrated math sequence replaces the traditional course pathway of algebra, geometry, and advanced algebra. This sequence was recognized by the board in 2015 when graduation requirements were revised to include the change. While some of our students follow an honors or an accelerated math pathway, the majority are completing an integrated math sequence of secondary math 1, 2, and 3. This year, our current juniors will be our first cohort of students who will complete the full sequence of integrated math. Educational Services is pleased to report that we have seen steady gains in growing student success in math. This is evident in the increasing number of students taking advanced fourth year courses, as well as students' performance on SBAC math assessment. Additionally, under the old state model, students took the CST assessment based on the math course they were completed. Currently, every junior takes part in the math SBAC assessment. While we would expect our results to be diluted, we have actually seen the reverse, a small, steady increase of math proficiency. A lengthy agenda item with background and data regarding student math performance was provided to the board. Tonight, Senior Director Mike Coates will summarize key points of math instruction and curriculum. He is joined by Mathematics Director Aaron Cross of Stanislaus County Office of Education. Ms. Cross works with districts across the county to assist in the transition of new math standards. Mr. Coates.
Good evening, Board President Zwallen, Superintendent Abel, trustees, and cabinet. Thank you for providing Ed Services this opportunity to provide this report. And as Ms. Johnson shared with you, we did provide you a lengthy report in your packet, but tonight we want to just summarize some of that because this really is a very large topic when you think about the standards, the implementation of those standards, and the order in which those standards are taught in the classroom and the curriculum that's used to do that. When you think about math, it's a pretty emotional subject for a lot of people. People either really love it or it wasn't their favorite class, right? And so it is a very emotional class for a lot of students. Math has been called the gatekeeper for college admissions, and for many years, math was a struggle and has been a struggle for many high school students. Many of us learned math with the aid of mnemonics and other tricks to do the math, like PEMDAS to help us remember the order of operations. We even had sayings like this to help us remember the steps and procedures. And what we learned is that students who could learn the steps and the procedures did well, until they advanced in math courses where they lacked that conceptual understanding. Procedures and steps fall short when students are asked to apply the math to real-world problems. Modesto City Schools teachers attended a math forum in 2013. The forum explored the differences between the traditional and integrated pathways. We attended with an open mind to learn about the pathways and determine what was best for our students. Each teacher provided feedback at the end of the day on their preferred pathway. The feedback from the teachers was overwhelmingly in favor of implementing the integrated sequence for Modesto City Schools. So a task force was formed that year to meet to plan the math implementation. Secondary Math 1 was piloted at 4 of our schools, and the task force recommended to implement the Mathematics Vision Project curriculum. The Board of Education approved the curriculum and course outlines for implementation to begin the following year, and the courses have been more fully developed and revisions have been brought back to the board. In April 2015, the board approved AR 6146 for integrated math to meet the algebra graduation requirement. Now, in Modesto City Schools, we really have three math pathways. If you look across the top pathway is the pathway that meets college and career readiness. Students in 7th and 8th grade take their math classes, move into the high school and take secondary math 1, 2, and 3, and then at their senior year, they're prepared for pre-calculus, finite, financial math. The middle row is our pathway for support. Students that are not quite ready to begin at the Math 1 level start at Math 180, and then they move into secondary Math 1 and 2. Some of them may go into 3 as a senior, or some of them may do financial math or other math options. On the bottom row is the accelerated or honors course. Students take in junior high the honors courses in 7th and 8th grade. Then they begin high school and pre-AP Math 1, 2, and 3, prepared to take calculus and statistics as a senior. There's also another option in that accelerated model, in that at some of our schools and some of our feeder districts include pre-AP Math 1 in the 8th grade, allowing those students to start pre-AP 2 when they get to high school, enables them to then actually start calculus in their junior year. The UC BORS, Board of Admissions and Relations of Schools, in April of 2013 gave us their support for both the integrated and the traditional model. So how's it going in Modesto City Schools? Well, Mrs. Johnson hinted at some of the data. The number of students taking the third year of college prep math in the sequence has increased. Last year in advanced algebra, we had 1,335 students. This year in secondary math 3, 1,499 students. So that's an increase in 12% of the students taking the third year of college prep math. If you look at what's going to happen next year, we see nice increases in students taking the advanced courses, those courses beyond Math 3 or pre-AP Math 3. You'll see for calculus, A, B, and BC, statistics, finite math, and pre-calculus in all 5 of those areas, an increase in the number of students taking the advanced math courses. And how are the students doing in their grades? Well, math has historically been the course that was most often failed. If you look way back to 2007, at that time, students took algebra. Students that were not successful in algebra, we made an Algebra A and an Algebra B and thought if we gave them 2 years of algebra, they could be more successful. And then we went to Algebra Essentials, where they took algebra for 3 years. You see that in those courses, we had a 22% failure rate. Creating more levels of algebra did not help. But now in 2017 in secondary math 1, we have 19% failures. That's still a high number, but we are proud that we're moving in the right direction. If you look at test scores, 2012 and 13 was our last year for the CST exams. At that time, students in the 11th grade took a CST course or CST test based on the course that they were taking. If you see the juniors, many of them were still taking algebra, and in 2013, 9% of them were proficient or advanced. Some students were still in geometry with 5%. Some students were in advanced algebra or algebra 2 at 11%. And then many students were at the summative math. Those would be any courses above Math 3 or advanced algebra. You see 48% of them. But if you look at the average of all 11th graders in their math classes, 17% were advanced and proficient. Now we fast forward to the last 2 years. Very different. Now all 11th grade students take the same test. They all take the CASP, regardless of the course they're in. And you can see that in 2015, we had 21% meeting the standards, and last year, 25%. This means that we have more students taking advanced level courses, students are scoring better on the assessments, and we have fewer Fs. To understand the implementation, we need to take a quick look at the standards. The California math standards are research-based with more than a decade of research. They're aligned with research on how students learn and how students understand math, research on mindset, how we learn new things and connect that to our prior learning, and on teaching practices. The math standards promote problem solving, communication, and critical thinking, and the standards develop conceptual understanding, procedural skills, fluency, and application through rich tasks on real-world problems. There are two types of standards. The first are the content standards. The scope of those, or the sequence of those over the K-12 years, the coherence or the connections of those, and then their rigor, conceptual understanding, skills, fluency, and the application. But then there's the standards of mathematical practice, which are very new. We did not have those in the 98 standards. These standards are really the heart of the new shifts in mathematics education. The instructional shifts vary greatly from the way that probably you and I learned math. And that's why when you look at our textbooks, they look very different from the textbooks before. In the framework, the course pathways are designed with two pathways: the traditional pathway of algebra, geometry, advanced algebra, and the integrated pathway. If you looked at the traditional, although those names are familiar, the actual content of those courses is very different than it would have been in the 97 standards. And then the integrated path, it represents higher mathematics as a connected subject, in that each course contains standards from all 6 of the conceptual categories. Both the integrated and the traditional pathway are designed to provide appropriate preparation for calculus. So what's happening around California? According to the most recent information we've obtained through the Stanislaus County Office of Education, approximately 2/3 of the districts in California have gone to the integrated path. And if you look at those standards, you'll see that on the left we have the areas of the standards, and the real difference that you see is in the traditional pathway. The 46 geometry standards are all in that geometry course. Whereas if you look at the integrated path of 1, 2, 3, you'll see that those geometry standards are integrated through all 3 years. Each of these courses have exactly the same standards. It's the same information. They're just sequenced in a different order. And in the past, geometry referred to a specific course, but now it refers to a conceptual category that appears across multiple courses. An important consideration that you look at when implementing the standards is the curriculum that you use. We're using the Mathematics Vision Project curriculum, and you can see on this map that it is widely used across the United States. It has met several reviews and is one that we're using as well as pretty much all high schools in our area. At this time, I want to turn the presentation over to Aaron Cross, Mathematics Director from Stanislaus County.
Welcome.
Thank you.
That's the forward.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to talk to you about the transition to standards and higher quality curriculum for mathematics in our county, which is the work that I've been supporting, basically helping to translate research related to effective mathematics instructional practices and support the implementation of that research in classrooms. So what I'd like to begin to speak to you about tonight is this idea of deep command in mathematics. And you'll see these 3 components that contribute to deep command in mathematics: conceptual understanding, procedural skills and fluency, and applications. Many teachers will tell you in the past they've been successful to help their students learn the math, to be able to work out the problems, but they can't seem to be able to solve the word problems. It's the perennial challenge of mathematics instruction. And what's missing in that case is a deeper conceptual understanding of the math operations that, when put together with the procedural skill and fluency, translates into students being able to understand not just how to do the math, but where and why the math applies to be able to solve real-world problems. As I think about the world that we're living in, really, we have technology at our fingertips that can get the answers to math problems. And we need to support students in being able to figure out, how does this mathematics apply to the world? How can I figure out what mathematics I know in order to solve a problem that may not have been solved yet? So what I want to talk to you about briefly is how Math Vision Project supports this move towards a deeper understanding. And so what you see on the screen is a sample task from the Secondary Math 1 course, right at the beginning of the course. And so students are given a visual image and asked to think numerically about the visual image. And you might ask yourself, what pattern do you see? And if the pattern continues, how many dots would there be at 3 minutes? And moving towards, through that task, then students would be able to express their ideas numerically and algebraically. So we have a visual image that students are thinking quantitatively about and abstractly about. An example of integration between something that would be maybe more geometric, this visual image, and something that would be more algebraic in a symbolic approach. Here's a sample of student work. And you can see that this student connected work in a table with the image, and another sample of student work, and this student shows kind of the complete solution to the task that includes the algebraic expression that connects to the visual image. And so what I want to talk to you about next is the teaching approach that changes from a more traditional approach as we are engaging students in this deeper learning. Our teachers are launching these tasks, giving students opportunities to bring their own intuition to the task, and then through class discussion and then on the back end of the task, teachers providing the direct instruction of the tasks, the students are arriving at this deep learning. And you see on my slide I have some NCTM research that supports this teaching practice of developing the task through the fifth practice there, 5, connecting students' intuitions with the mathematics. Mike talked to you about the standards for mathematical practice, and it's through these deep tasks that students really engage in these standards for mathematical practice. Now, the other piece that I would want to bring to you is some research led by Mark Driscoll that provides a framework for English learners to access rich and meaningful mathematics learning. And I know that supporting English learners to mathematics achievement is very important to this district. And Mark Driscoll calls for these 4 components of a program that will do just that. Rich tasks, multiple representations of the mathematics, development of mathematical communication, and having structured teacher routines and practices in place. So as you think about the task that I showed you, all of it is there. Opportunities to delve deeply into a task, to look at it through different perspectives, to talk about it as students. And then the other thing I wanted to bring to you is a snapshot of the previous mathematics curriculum. And this is just one snapshot of the curriculum, but it's pretty typical. And so as we think about the opportunities provided by this task, and where is the richness, where's the connection to real world problem solving, and the opportunities for mathematical communication. So as you reflect on your own mathematics preparation through school, it often looked like this, and many of us were successful with mathematics that looked like this. But many of our students have not been served by this kind of mathematics. And so the opportunity to deepen for students is important and it's meaningful. And they're both examples from 9th grade. Yeah. And so in closure, I would put before you some next steps. You know, your teachers have been supported through the shift with professional development, but change is hard. And you may have heard that teachers often teach the way we were taught. And so oftentimes teachers need support in kind of re-envisioning the math classroom and how to support not just some students to meaningful math learning, but all students to meaningful math learning. And so continued professional development, continued work to build on the Math Vision Project curriculum so that it can be fully enacted and supported the way it was intended to lead to this deeper learning. And then continued digging into current research on best math instructional practices so that we have a shared vision of what effective mathematics instruction looks like. shared goals to lead towards deep learning. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you for this information. Do we have any questions from the board? Trustee Newman.
Well, thank you, Ms. Cross, for coming tonight and joining us and giving us your expertise. And thank you, Mike, for your report, Mr. Coates, for your report. I appreciate this, a thorough report. I'm excited to see that the number of students taking advanced math has increased. And so I asked this question of Ms. Johnson earlier today, and so I'm reading my questions from my email. But so how do our rates compare with the state average?
Actually, as far as taking advanced math, we looked into our CDE data quest, and so the most current is 2014-15. It's at that time 2.01% of students were taking AP calculus, and 1.34 took AP statistics. In Modesto City Schools at that time, 2.36 took AP calculus and 3.5 took AP statistics. So even going back to 14-15, Modesto City Schools was much higher than this state in both of those courses and students taking those more advanced classes.
That's great. And then with regard to, and you corrected the issue on the chart with regard to the paths and that we do have the secondary math being offered at two of our junior high schools. Then on the issue of how we moved from the traditional path to the integrated path and you know, the involvement of our staff in that, how did that process take place?
So all of Modesto City Schools high school math teachers, which were approximately 100, were invited to the forum that Mr. Coates talked about. 65 of those teachers provided feedback, and actually we have dug into Ed Services archives, and here are all the feedback that we received from the teachers. So 65 provided feedback, with 44 supporting integrated, 4 supported traditional, 6 really didn't have an opinion one way or the other, 3 requested more information, and 6 had other comments like, let's just try both and see what works. But the overwhelming was for the integrated.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Trustee Walker.
There's a lot in this report. And I guess part of it is that getting through the first 8 or 9 pages sort of requires me to sort of dig through, for lack of a better term, the copy and paste talking points out of the state. I think this is where I differ from a lot of folks, is that my children have gone through what we were doing before, what we're doing now, and what's going on after. And there is a difference. This first thing at the bottom of page 1 talks about how we're behind other countries, and then uses the NAEP as the second sentence that gets MathWorks Framework of California lists this sentence talking about being behind international achievers. It doesn't put the second sentence behind it in the report that then justifies it with the NAEP. The NAEP's a U.S. test, and I don't understand the correlation between the NAEP and international standards, although it goes deeper into this into TIMS later, which is a different discussion. But I don't understand why they're trying to correlate the NAEP with international standards, but that's the state. And I guess that's my frustration with reading through this report, and I've spent a great deal of time looking at it. I look at NAEP scores, which wasn't included here. 2000, 2015, they haven't moved far. They've gone up a little, gone down a little bit. Massachusetts was the only one. I don't get that connection between international and NAEP, and then using it to justify why we're so far behind. Because it does paint a picture of somehow that we were in trouble. And I don't feel like we were in trouble in 2013 with math. That was certainly the position being put out there. But as a parent who had children in the school district, I can see the difference in what we were doing then and now. And it's not higher. And I have the 97 standards and I have the new ones. We've clearly moved Algebra 1 directly out of 8th grade into 9th grade and then we've mixed it. I guess the first question would be, doesn't that limit when we do integrated? If a student wanted to take Algebra 1 and Geometry at the same time, now that process is impossible, isn't it? And since they could double up on those courses in the past? The question is essentially, if we're integrated, there's no way to double up Algebra 1 and Geometry. You could take those courses in tandem in the past. Now you have to progress through a 3-step process where they're integrated. There's no way to double those up and get ahead.
One response that I would like to make is that a comparison between the 1997 standards and the current state standards really does need to be made deeper than a course level. And yes, I'm sure. So, case in point, as we look at the current 8th grade California state standards that we have been calling 8th grade standards, and we delve deeply into those standards, we see, oh man, there's a lot of Algebra 1 sitting right here. And when we layer that Algebra 1 with the standards for mathematical practice, it's a more rich Algebra 1 experience. Now I will say that the fullness of the Algebra 1 course is not sitting in the 8th grade course. Case in point, quadratic equations don't sit in the current 8th grade Common Core math course, although solving linear equations, graphing linear equations, solving systems of inequations, of linear equations, all of that is sitting currently in that course with more rich geometry experiences alongside. And so to respond to the question about, as we're looking at course comparisons, we have to dig into the standards themselves. I would also like to share that my colleagues at the Sacramento County Office of Education were involved in the crosswalking process that preceded the state board's adoption of the current standards. And there are documents on the Sacramento County Office website that create some alignments between the 1997 standards. And you may recall that with the adoption of the Common Core standards, states were given the opportunity to provide additions to the standards to meet the current rigor of the state standards. And my colleagues at the Sacramento County office were involved in that process. And once those were adopted in place, there was a period of learning for our state where at first we didn't really deeply understand the learning targets called for in the new standards. And the state board went back and made a correction to the adoption of the standards, realizing that the insertions that were made were not appropriate given the rigor of what was already there. And so that was corrected. There are still some California additions, but many fewer than were in the original adoption.
Essentially what they did was what the legal contract requires. When they took Common Core state standards, you were required to take 85%. You can only substitute 15%. So what we're left with is what 15% they chose, which was when my presentation I have later that was put together by Zev Mormon, Professor Milgram, Dr. Evers, were advocating to put back Algebra 1 at the 8th grade level was taken out because there wasn't enough room. It wasn't necessarily an issue of what we couldn't. It was, you've got 15% to work with and this is all we've got.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of my frustration because I have a student who's high achieving
Yeah.
and I have one that's not.
Yeah.
But I also have nieces and nephews and I also talk to students across all sorts of campuses. It doesn't get us where we need to be, I don't believe, as somebody who has a degree in math.
And as someone who also has a degree in math, and with all due respect and wanting to be respectful to the time, these are very important conversations. You know, our goal in the state of California at Modesto City Schools is that all students would have opportunities to achieve in mathematics to the highest levels of their abilities, and that's all of our goals, all of our children. And so opportunities to provide that deep learning, opportunities to provide accelerated pathways, absolutely, I think we share the same goals. And how will we achieve those same goals, I think, is worthy of conversation and working together.
How do we get through 5 courses in 3 materials? Because I'm looking at what we're calling an accelerated pathway. And I'll be honest, when I look at the students at Enox who I know have moved into higher level math, They're not there because they went through integrated math. They're there because their parents pulled them and sent them to MJC and got the trig course and the pre-calculus course to get them moved forward. That was a mistake I've made. I didn't do that, but how do you get through Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Pre-Calculus, and Trigonometry in 3 courses and do it effectively? I don't see how that happens as somebody who's done this.
So to respond to that, in our secondary math 1, 2, 3 sequence, trigonometry is embedded, particularly in the honors pathway. As you look at the standards, as I'm sure that you know, there are standards indicated with the plus symbol that indicate those standards that are beyond the career readiness goal for students, but for those students that are on the pathway towards STEM careers, there are additional learning goals for them. And so in an honors pathway, those what we call the plus standards are spread throughout the math 1, 2, 3, and so by the time they complete their honors math 3 experience, the trigonometry is embedded. Much of the pre-calculus is embedded. And then the other piece of it that I would like to share is that my colleagues that are teaching AP Calculus talk to me about the excitement they have for their students understanding things like rates of change on a far greater level than their previous students ever had. And so they're bringing those deeper experiences with them into their calculus learning, and they're learning calculus with understanding that they may not have fully had opportunities for before. So I'm passionate about this. I'm excited about the transitions that have made, but I also will tell you, I see that the changes are worthy of support, because at every school across our county, we have teachers that are seeing how deeper learning supports students and are excited about the outcomes. And we have other teachers that are still grappling with beliefs about whether students can learn math, grappling with their abilities to provide quality instructional experiences with students. And so we need to continue to provide those supports.
I guess back to me again. My daughter's doing the honors math pathway, and what's additional that they've added is 2 modules and go a little bit quicker. I don't see, knowing what I've had to do and what I think she needs to do to be successful, and other students who need to be successful if they're going to go into a Davis level science program or forensic biology, computer programming, STEM, that it's not 2 modules and go faster. There's no way that covers 2 complete courses of mathematics. And again, I guess the problem is that there's no way, looking at what she's got in her hands now, that provides her and preps her for calculus. And I also think the idea that if we go a traditional path, there's more ways to now buttress this up and bring more things in to then allow that student to take Algebra 1 and Geometry at the same time, which theoretically lets them get through that in 9th grade. Whether we debate it should be in 8th grade or not is another story, but then they can move to 10th and 11th. I am not a fan, but that's clear, I guess.
I would like to ask a clarifying question, because I've heard you talk about 5 courses. And so if I understand you correctly, and please clarify, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, do you mean trigonometry and pre-calculus?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And so under the previous 1997 standards, trigonometry was typically provided in a pre-calculus course. And so there would typically have been 4 courses preceding calculus. And so what we're talking about is not condensing 5 years into 3 years, but rather 4 years into 3 years. And I might encourage some examination of Neil Finkelstein's report on course pathways. I'm sure you've probably examined it. Neil Finkelstein is a senior research director at WestEd, and he, I want to say 2014, published a report on math pathways, and one of the things that he talked about was many pathways to calculus. We must provide one. We must provide a pathway to calculus. There are different ways that a district can provide it.
All right. Any more questions from the board?
I'll do one more. Pedagogy. MVP is using something called constructivist discovery, problem-based experiential and inquiry. And that's my other frustration. We've taken experimental and we've now piled more experimental on top of it. And it does not get a good rating from the teachers that reviewed it in Washington. And one of the problems they had was that you can't get through this material in the classroom in the time frame needed because you're sort of just throwing something out there and then you sort of work through it and you bounce along. But again, it's now another experimental teaching approach on top of a approach that I still feel is experimental and doesn't provide flexibility. It's one size fits all again unless you do the faster, quicker mode. And
Do you have a question about that she could answer?
constructivist
I
discovery,
would love
problem-based,
to discuss
experiential,
pedagogy.
inquiry-based teaching.
I would love to discuss it. So what I will say, and try to keep my comments brief. In 2010, the National Math Panel, which was commissioned by the president at that time, put together the National Math Panel Advisory Report. And in, I believe, Chapter 7 on Instructional Strategies, there was some very strong language that said neither a strictly teacher-directed approach nor a strictly student-centered approach is appropriate. And so really, a responsible instruction finds its balance between allowing students to grapple with the mathematics and then sharing the expertise and the learning with students, directing that as a teacher. And so I would say maybe cause us to think about the difference between the curriculum, which is just the book that lands in front of teachers and students, and then it's the enacted curriculum, the curriculum that comes alive by the teacher's decisions about the curriculum. And a teacher can make numerous decisions about a given lesson in terms of how teacher directed do I want to be or how student centered do I want to be. Now, current research in terms of pedagogy, really right now the best out there is NCTM's Principles to Actions, which was a 2014 publication where the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics summarized decades of what makes effective math teaching practices for students. And there are 8 math practices, and perhaps I would love to come talk to you about them more in depth. But how do we effectively take a curriculum and make strong, solid teacher decisions about it so that what is enacted with students is responsible and will lead to the desired learning outcomes?
All right, any other questions from the board? Comments from the public?
Good evening. My name is Elibet Ambrosio, and I'm a teacher here at for Modesto City Schools, currently working at Johansen. Been in the school district for 13 years. First time I'm speaking in front of a panel of board members, and I share the frustrations with Mr. Walker on a daily basis. I live, I breathe, and I will probably die doing mathematics. My passion is so great that back in 2006, I went back and I got a master's in mathematics from the University of Merced. I'm currently one of the Data-Enabled Science and Computational Analysis Research Training, which stands for Descartes. And you were asking about the pathway that we have for calculus. No, it's not. We need to drop MVP. We have to drop MVP. I'm actually, none of my colleagues know that I'm here, but I made the commitment to be here. And I'm speaking for many. We're not preparing our students. And we have a more serious issue here in our district other than just simply which way is better to teach, the traditional or the integrated approach. It's just teaching mathematics with passion. Being able to plant that seed early in those kids. We're doing them a disservice. This is not the way to go. We need to drop Mathematics Vision Project immediately. So I've offered Mr. Coates to help out. I have some ideas. I have people that I work with, and we're full of ideas. So I share the same frustrations, Mr. Walker, on a daily basis. I also teach calculus, and I'd have to say that probably my passing rate is about 50%. And I only have 14 kids. It's sad, but it's Johansen. And I love those kids.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, members of the board president, superintendent, cabinet. My name is Lori Gaines, and I am a math teacher at Gregory, and this is my 20th year teaching. So I've taught their traditional curriculum for 18 years, and then the integrated for the past 2 or so. And to address Mr. Walker, I understand where you are coming from, but I want to express to you my joy in these last 2 years of teaching under this new curriculum and watching students who I've taught previously in that traditional pre-calculus course and who I'm now teaching in the Honors Math 3 course, and I'm teaching both simultaneously, and the difference is astounding. My Honors Math 3 kids can outthink and outperform my pre-AP pre-calculus kids on any given day, on any given topic in pre-calculus. My Honors Math 3 kids are now mathematical thinkers, so much so that when they are working on one of their problems, as a habit, they will call me over, cover up their paper, and say, before I show you what I got, can I explain to you my thought process first? I've never, ever had a student do that. As an experiment, I gave my traditional pre-AP pre-calculus kids a copy of just a unit circle. They've already learned their special triangles, and I said, take what you know and apply it to this, and they had no idea what to do. Because, as Aaron Cross and Mike Coates both stated, there's a difference between rote memorization and being able to do a procedure and being able to think the mathematics. So I just wanted to share, as a teacher that teaches both and is new to the MVP curriculum, it is amazing. Every single day is a joy. I enjoy teaching more now than I did in my previous 18 years. And I absolutely understand the frustrations of parents. You have been so used to being able to help your students, your children with their math, and that changes very much with this curriculum, and I do understand that frustration. But that's why we're here. And we are here to support you in any way that we can in giving you tools and being available as extra resources. So I just, again, wanted to say it is amazing. And there are a lot of us teachers. I know there's some frustrated teachers out there, but the ones that I know and the ones that I talk to were very concerned when they saw this on the agenda, because they said this is one of the best things that's happened to our students in years. Please tell me they're not thinking of taking this away. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay. Comments from the public? More?
Good evening. My name is Christina Rubalcava, and I'm a math teacher at Enox High School. And I have taught using both the layered and integrated approaches. As Mr. Coates mentioned, the standards are organized now into 2 potential pathways. I feel that calling the traditional pathway traditional is a bit of a misnomer because it makes us think of the math 10 years ago, which is not really the case. To achieve the charge of the current California framework, both approaches call for students to engage in rich tasks, to develop procedural fluency from conceptual understanding, and to achieve the standards for mathematical practice. So in the previous approach, it was basically a one-size-fits-all. You were either good at memorizing and doing it quickly, or you weren't. Students started to view math as an answer-getting subject, and they lost the beauty of mathematics. We want students to be good problem solvers. We want them to be able to apply multiple strategies to a novel situation. We don't want them to have to wait for a list of procedures to try to solve a problem. Integrated math allows students of all ability levels to find an entry point to solving problems and provides more opportunities for acceleration for our top students. For example, I have one freshman who is concurrently taking Pre-AP Math 1 and Pre-AP Math 2. He will take Pre-AP Math 3 as a sophomore and Calculus AB as a junior, and then BC as a senior. And I have about 10 freshmen that will all make it to Calculus BC. I was one of the first teachers in the district to pilot the integrated curriculum with a group of students who earned a D or F in algebra as freshmen. And these students did not enjoy math at all, and they had not been successful up to that point. By the end of that 3-year span, my pilot group was working at the same level as my advanced algebra and pre-calculus students. This year I'm teaching pre-AP Secondary Math 2, and I've never been so excited to see what my students can do. This group is making connections between concepts that I've never seen in my 11 years of teaching. They're developing associations between concepts that I never got even in my collegiate level math classes. The integrated approach allows students to draw upon previous knowledge and make connections to new concepts. For example, in my Algebra 2 class, I would spend a day, maybe two, on the equation of a circle. Students would be given the equation of a circle, and they would be asked to write or graph a circle given information. And they would have a day or two to memorize that and be able to produce that. In the Mathematics Vision Project curriculum, the same concept is spiraled over 3 different tasks. So the first task is developmental. They actually took and derived the equation of a circle from Pythagorean theorem. And then my job as a teacher is to take that experiment and connect it to procedures, connect it to the real world math. And so we do that.
Just as a reminder, we have a 3-minute limit.
Yes, I just
even
wanted
for
to.
comments, but try
Thank you.
to
I'll go ahead and finish it up. So my role as a teacher is to take the experimental and the concrete and connect it to the procedural and abstract, which you can see there. So just to wrap it up, the bottom line for me is that I think the integrated approach is a better approach for students. They can see connections between these big mathematical ideas. However, I think that rather than throwing out the last 5 years, what we need to do is develop resources to support teachers and students and parents in connecting that procedural to the abstract and to the concrete representational. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No documents. You can just put the timer up.
It is
Wait.
helpful, isn't it, to have that?
It's fine.
It's helpful for me.
Thank you. My name is Steve McEwen. For those of you who don't know me, I teach math at Modesto High. I have been around long enough. I saw the first integrated curriculum that was not very well. Now, I am not fortunate enough to teach AP, IB, or advanced kids. I have the regular secondary math too. And it's brutal. These tasks, I understand what we're trying to do. This material is killing the kids. So when we look at these numbers, how many more are in Math 3? Well, the counselors were told to put seniors and stuff in Math 3, even though they probably should have went into financial math. We have seniors that are not going to pass this semester. I hope they don't need the math credits to graduate. They were put in there on purpose. When we look at the math enrollment, there's not a lot of advanced math kids, and that's because those are smaller classes. But if we look at the failure rate, that's misidentified data. I have teachers from several different schools that give points for participation. We have never done that in math class. For a real college prep class, I would give only 10% for homework, and more of the points would be on testing. We have some teachers that are giving 50% on homework, and they're not really grading it, we're just checking, did they do it? The benchmarks. Some teachers will give points on the benchmarks for being close. Well, they had the right idea. I've got kids that have the right idea but can't actually subtract the numbers correctly. So we're not helping anybody by passing these kids on. We have teachers that are working hard to try to teach things that they missed. This stuff, the MVP has a lot of skills that are missing. How much stuff do we have to copy to fill in the holes of this stuff? We could have done a better job if we had kept the regular stuff and added applied problems. We could have done that a lot better and a lot easier than this material that we're getting. Some of the tasks are good, some of them are miserable. I got kids that'll start, they can get the first question out of the 5, but once it hits to a certain point, there is no way they can go on from that. So even though the data looks great, we're not really passing the kids on with higher math strength. We're passing them on because they work hard. And I understand that. It's really disheartening for a kid who does all of his work and works real hard, but the best he can do is 40% on a regular college prep grading scale. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, comments from the public.
Thank you. Susie Tornberg. I've had a pleasure of actually working with Aaron Cross in the federal math grant. I was in the federal math grant for 3 years, 5 years ago? About 5 years ago. So I understand the math practices and how it's applied. You have a task, you approach it through analytical and research and solving and every little tool you have in the kit to summarize that. Let me show you one thing. I know I'm 6th grade and I know we're talking a lot about high school, but I think I lead to them. This right here is our pacing guide, and this pacing guide is Module 1 and Module 2, which is the first trimester. The first trimester right now we're looking at 48 lessons. 48 lessons doesn't give us time to do any of those solve its, enrichments, investigations, because that's where the math understanding is applied. I have students who will look at a hexagon today, for example, and they can't see any other shape in the hexagon. They're drowning in too much information. This right here is fine for the first trimester. I can do this in the first trimester. However, our report card is a spiraling curriculum, which I have to go back and reteach. Let me show you. So this is first trimester. This is first and second trimester. So each trimester has to go back and respiral. So even though my tear out math book has nothing supporting me to actually go back and do any more ratios, Common Core websites have become my best friend for finding ditto sheets so I can ask the kids, do you still remember how to do ratios? We have nothing in the book to do it, but can you still do it? Let me show you the end of the year. So, trimester 1 and 2 and 3. All of this material is now required in 3 weeks. When I'm working on a report card, I need to be able to pass out and prove that the kids have accomplished both going across the trimesters and also down through module 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have to keep go back and respiraling. So as much as we have all these great tools that I've learned through the federal math grant, which is great because it does affect my thinking and how I can try to approach the students on this, we don't have a curriculum, we don't have a report card that is actually being efficient at the 6th grade level to support my wonderful high school teachers. I feel that I'm doing them an injustice because I'm just racing through it so we can finish it so that maybe they remember it before the state test, which we finished last week. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Rich.
Good evening. My name is Mike Rich. I'm the principal of Davis High School, and I like to think of myself as a math teacher on assignment. So I see in this discussion 3 separate issues. So I see an issue where we're debating, and Aaron spoke very eloquently on the standards. I see an issue of the course sequence that we're using, and I see an issue of the curriculum with which we're using. I think we've kind of convoluted that argument throughout tonight. So I'd like to address what was on the board agenda specifically about the integrated pathway. So mathematical disciplines do not exist in isolation. When issues arrive in the workforce that require a mathematical approach, no one says, hold on, let me get my algebra book out and solve this problem. In fact, solutions are often best sought through pattern recognition, model building, and sample trial and error. The standards for mathematical practice, which we have heard about quite a lot on the screen, excuse me, help students solve real-world problems. I just want to read the 8 mathematical practices. Make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Reason abstractly and quantitatively. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Model with mathematics. Use appropriate tools strategically. Attend to precision. Look for and make use of structure. Look for and express regularity in repeated reasoning. These are standards that were not present in the 1997 standard set. So when we hear, hey, let's just take the old ones and throw some word problems on there, that doesn't address the standards that have been adopted. Students who complete their coursework through a traditional pathway often lose the connection between mathematical disciplines. How many times have we heard someone say, I'm really bad at algebra, but I'm good at geometry? This reflects the deficiency in identifying the connections between the abstract and the concrete. In traditional course sequence, it is not until students are exposed to this, we keep talking about calculus, so I had the opportunity to teach that for 5 years. It is not until calculus that they actually are introduced to the idea that algebra and geometry are really the same discipline of mathematics. An integrated approach builds this understanding at the conceptual level and has the potential to increase student understanding. In EdSource, it's quoted to say, proponents of the integrated pathway argue that it is academically more effective and in line with how secondary math is taught in Japan, Singapore, and other countries where students are performing at a higher level than those in the US. As Phil Darrow, one of the architects of the Common Core Mathematics Standards, pointed out, math instruction in Japan and other Asian countries is and always has been integrated. The US actually has an integrated approach up until the 8th grade, and then we switch to a non-integrated pathway. It makes a lot more sense for students to learn some algebra this year and some next year than to say, stop, we're going to do some geometry, okay, now we're going to go back to algebra. That was from David Foster, the Executive Director of the Silicon Valley Math Initiative. I am also a parent. I have a student in the pre-AP math coursework, both at the junior high level and the high school level. They will both be able to reach calculus by their junior year, a feat that probably would not have been available prior to that, and I'm grateful for that opportunity for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public?
Hello, my name is Mark Gonzalez. I teach at Bayer High School. I've been teaching for 9 years, and I'm kind of with Steve with the idea that I've been teaching secondary math 1, algebra, algebra essentials. I did do some pre-calculus, and I also do financial math. In my opinion, and I do talk to my other Bayer teachers, I feel we should go back to traditional. And it's not because I'm afraid of change or anything like that. I have appreciated everything I've learned from all the developments, and I think that richness that we're talking about is really coming from the teacher. The teacher themselves can take the material and make kids think a little bit deeper. Part of the issue that I have is I think of myself as more dealing with the average student, not the ones going to pre-calculus, calculus. I'm thinking about those that maybe are just going to go to high school and that's it. I feel that we are doing a disservice to them with this integrated approach, just because I do see the struggle every day. Now, I think with pre-calculus, calculus kids in honors, I think with either material they can do great. It's really on the teacher to help guide that richness, to make it better for them, to make the students think a little bit more. But again, in my personal opinion, yes, I did and was raised through a traditional approach. I think I've learned a lot through the math practices that I could really apply to a traditional framework and make my students think a little bit deeper. We have talked about that we were supposed to get that deeper understanding going through the integrated approach, but I also feel that same frustration that I feel like I have to rush through things, and I'm not really being able to spend that quality time that I thought I was going to be able to make the kids really understand what they're doing. And that's what I really want to do, so that way they can leave with that idea that they get a good sense of knowledge of what they're coming with and what they're going out of. I don't know, that's just my personal opinion, but I feel that traditional is, something that we could still work with the ideas of what we learn through professional developments for a teacher to make it richer for the students. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? All right, any comments from the board? Trustee Newman.
I just want to thank all the teachers and people that came out and spoke on this. This is a really important issue, worth our time, and worth our time to look at. And I just appreciate the time. And I really, Ms. Rubalcaba, thank you for your point. It was something I was writing down before, but the resources we need to, as a district, direct resources to support our teachers and students. And I think that's one of the things that, as a parent in the MVP that has students doing the MVP, and my students will reach calculus. and Calculus BC in their senior year, because we accelerated in junior high in Modesto City Schools at Roosevelt and La Loma. But giving those resources to our students in terms of additional materials that maybe would address some of the issues raised by Mr. McKeon and Mr. Gonzalez, in terms of more help that would enrich them, and then training your teachers on how to use them. So the tool is the MVP, but there's things we can use in addition to that, and that's what I think we can as we move forward, that's what I'd like to see us do. Trustee Barandika.
I really want to apply the student perspective to the issue, and math is something that I've always been incredibly passionate about. I've loved math. I've been advanced since second grade. Actually, Miss Leitner taught me at Stanislaus Union. So it's just the entire reason I actually came to Modesto City Schools was math. In 2013, I sat in Mr. Albritton's office, and he told me that they could accommodate my math needs, and I was sold. But a lot has changed since 2013. The entire math system has changed, and I feel it's not really for the better. Now, don't get me wrong. No one had this. No one set out with this in mind. A system based on mutual cooperation seems exciting and progressive. However, it has its downsides. Where peer pressure is positive in adults, it is the opposite in youth. It's hard for kids to try, and everyone feels confused. Luckily, I missed integrated math. And I say luckily because, honestly, I can't do it. I'm in Calculus BC and struggle to help my third grade cousin in math. Common Core math is not what you would call traditional arithmetic. And if you use traditional arithmetic in your processes in presenting your answers, you are penalized and do not receive credit. And we talked a lot about a new order, and I find the order nonsensical, because how can you understand patterns without understanding the math behind these patterns and going through lines and other series? In speaking with math teachers from my site, I was met with the same confusion and frustration. We find a lot of students sitting there, and it's difficult, and they feel disenfranchised, they're confused. A lot of the kids are supposed to, with that initial start on cooperation instead of teacher instruction, these kids are met with frustration, and they feel like they can't succeed, and from there, they don't have a growth mindset, so they shut down. So I find that math has become increasingly difficult, and these kids who have struggled in math continue to struggle in math. I've tutored math for 4 years in order to help my football players stay eligible, and they're not doing any better. If they were failing, they're still failing, and they're failing at a lower percentage, because it is incredibly hard to understand how to think critically if you don't really have the math in mind. So I think a step back to the traditional would be in our best, would be the best move. I feel like it wasn't broken. I feel like we were doing fine, and I always go by, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right. Thank you very much for your input. Any other? Trustee Marks.
I just appreciate all the work that went into this to present this tonight. I can tell that there was a lot of effort went into it, and I really appreciate hearing from the teacher's perspective. Just having you come and really share your heart about what you're teaching, why you're teaching it, your enthusiasm, your lack of it, whatever it is that's happened in your classroom because of how we've changed over the years. And I think that that's really helpful. And I gave my son, just to make a comment about Derek's comment about the elementary, my son has a PhD in optical science. He got a fellowship to a school out of state, and he graduated from Modesto City Schools. And I asked him to do a problem in third grade. He was like, there is no way I even know what they're asking. He could not figure out what they were asking for. And he said, and he develops prototypes for companies around the world and some for the government. But it was just one of those things where it was a surprise to me how difficult the problem was for him to solve when he had higher level thinking and problem solving skills. And so I can't say that really relates totally to what we're talking about tonight, but it was the idea of the integrated math and the struggle right now of what is best for the students. And so I know you gave me a lot more to think about than I expected tonight. I came with an open mind, ready to hear, and I still have an open mind to where we're going with this. But I do believe that integrated math has
it has some issues that we need to solve if we continue on with it. And I think our students and our teachers need some other tools maybe that might help with that, if that's what we end up with. But I don't know right now. This is just a report.
Trustee Walker?
I'll just say thank you to everybody that spoke tonight and everybody that presented. My intent behind this agenda item was for those who don't always have all the resources. I'm going to do what I do with my daughters because I have that ability to do it. My real concern and worry is that those students whose parents don't have the resources that I have, that can't say, you know what, this ain't working, I can go do my own thing. And that's my real concern here, because I've got $500 worth of math books sitting at home. I've got DVDs. I will pull my daughter next year and she will do her third year of math at home with us, and then she'll return and do a third year to graduate as her senior year. I don't know what other parents do, but I appreciate your input. I've talked to MJC, I've reached out to the UCs, I've reached out to the CSUs, I've reached out to Professor Milgram this week and expect to hear back from him, and he was the author of the 97 standards. I will reach out to Zev Worman. I don't know what we do here, but my intent was looking after those who don't have the same resources that I do. And I know exactly what Dominic's talking about because I see it in my youngest, I see it at the other children, and it doesn't matter who I talk to in the community about this issue. There ain't a whole lot of disagreement with where I'm standing here, and I just appreciate you taking the time to talk and present your opinion and take time to show up at a meeting. It's not easy to do. Thank you.
All right. Don't see any of the lights. This is a report only, so we will take a break until 8:15 and then reassemble. Thank you.